If more of you supported the show, I'd be less sick of podcasts.
The blah blah blah.
Sending out good vibes.
The blah blah blah.
Good vibes. Good vibes.
The blah blah blah.
Good vibes. Good vibes.
108 breaths of deep gratitude and prayers for guidance and protection. And put on a didgeridoo and shamanic drumming track. Shivers or vibrations and stuff like that.
NASA was being used to take the STS up and then deploy these Air Force satellites that are connected to this new investigation black project to research what's coming into our solar system from the periphery.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica Show. We are going to be chatting with Gary and Darcy a little bit later about crop circles and UFOs and documentary films and all that fun stuff. Fantastic chat. We got Graham's got some papers here. He's looking pretty official today.
Hey, buddy, look at this. I found
Confidential.
I found old papers.
Where'd you find them?
It just I was going through stuff looking for some old papers, but not this type. But I found these old papers that I must have had from the 90s, like Conspiracy 1987. Like this is back before internet and this is a Special Center for Action Intelligence report by Bo Gritz. And then there's a confidential Operation Majority, William Cooper. Research file, Groom Lake, Nevada. I mean, I was just like, wow, what are these? These are all like papers that I must have ordered from a.
Oh, you think you ordered these on the line?
Well, I might have got them from like the UFO organizations back in the mid 90s, maybe. I'm not sure. Like
Operation Majority.
Yeah.
Confidential.
Oh, it's fascinating.
This is the font they went with. I, Milton William Cooper.
Yeah. So that's Bill Cooper.
Solemnly swear that, to the best of my knowledge, I swear that I saw this information in 1972 in the performance of my duties as a member of the intelligence briefing team of the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet as a petty officer in the U.S. Navy.
Anyways, I mean, I highlighted a couple of things from this intelligent report because it's very prescient, actually. It's pretty amazing. And then this conspiracy thing. This is a transcript of a talk given by John Judge in Berkeley, California, 87. And it's pretty there's some things in there I was thinking about you. Like there's some stuff in there about Hitler and the world. So I thought, I'll highlight some of it and I can play around with it for a couple episodes on the Project Operation.
There you have it.
Yeah.
Where'd you find them? Just in an old box?
Well, in an old bag box, yeah, kind of like. I had some stuff from my dad, for example.
Else is
some
in
old
there?
stuff some stuff from my dad, previous work stuff that my dad would hand me.
Was your dad a conspiracy guy?
No, not really. Well, he was pretty open-minded, but he wasn't a conspiracy guy. I mean, I don't know. That was kind of before conspiracy.
Those aren't his files, though? They're yours?
They're not. They're mine, I think. Yeah.
From the MUFON days? Early 90s?
Probably. Early 90s, yeah, probably.
You're really going down the rabbit hole.
I know. That's what I was thinking. I mean, I had this stuff like, oh my God, they were talking about this stuff how many years ago now? 30 years ago almost? 25, 30 years ago?
87 would be like...
well, 87 is more than 30 and 34 years ago.
34 years
But I mean, early now. That's when this was... I'm sure that I got this later on. I wasn't really into this stuff in the 80s. It was in the 90s, really.
There you have it. Graham's got his little paper collection there. Attaboy.
Like this one from, for example, this one from Bo Gritz here is...
Bo Gritz.
This is from April 1990. One of the best kept secrets in the world is that an unelected elite has ruled America for decades. Ours is now a government of, by, and for a powerful clique of megabuck people who use tax-exempt foundations, ivory tower universities, and national news media to chart a course toward a one-world socialist state. Socialism, you say, is contrary to capitalism? Not so when you consider the words of John D. Rockefeller. Competition is a crime. Under a one-world socialist system, a colossal monopoly would be created in favor of the industrial giants with insatiable greed. This power has already reduced our legal government to mere tools of implementation. I mean, what? Like 30 years later, 31 years later, look what's happening.
What's happening?
Unbelievable. It's happening.
COVID?
Well, yeah, it's the tool. It's the tools of that's the tool of implementation.
It's all happening. Some people would argue. All happening.
The Council on Foreign Relation and its domestic sisters, the Committee for Economic Development and the Trilateral Commission, use tax-exempt foundations to fund private think tanks that plan policy moves that will keep all governments on a collision course with a one world order. Once policy has been decided, the inner circle use our legitimate executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government to expedite these movements. The Fourth Estate news media serves to sell new programs to a naive public. Like, that was before the media. Like, the media is so much worse than it had to be, so much worse than it was 31 years ago. I mean, lately it's just been out of control, full blown out of control. We, the unjabbed, are the pandemic.
I'm not unjabbed.
So they go through a whole bunch of like corporations, and the CFR has 2,500 members, select by invitation only. It is to the USA that what the Politburo is to the USSR. Serving as the propaganda arm of this shadow government are the heads of all major American media. Example, Thornton Bradshaw, RCA, Boone Arledge, ABC News, William Paley, CBS, Henry Miller, Time, Richard Smith, Newsweek, Peter Bernstein, U.S. News and World Report, Max Frankel, New York Times, Katharine Graham, Washington Post, Thomas Johnson, LA Times, also David Brinkley, Charles Collingwood, Dan Rather, Barbara Walters, John Chancellor, David Shore, ... Decisions made by this American Politburo are carried out by the elected officials, whose offices are bought by CFR backing. So demanding are our real taskmasters that segments within the executive branch have been bypassing our constitutional system, justifying any means in order to accomplish CFR stated ends. Alfred McCoy's book, The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia, specifically reveals how CIA trafficking in opiates to fund an expansion in the Vietnam War into Laos and Cambodia, effectively circumventing a liberal Congress refusal to approve the CIA's proposed operations. In his book, carefully documented The Crime of Patriots, former Wall Street Journal staff Jonathan Whitney revealed for the first time how the CIA set up the Nugan Bank in Australia specifically to launder their drug funds. Is it not? So okay, like, since I'm on this, I'm just going to read the last paragraph here. So, because to me, this seems like it aged very well, 31 years later. Like, I didn't think they were talking about the drug war, the drug trafficking back then in 90.
Well, wasn't that when was Iran-Contra?
Well, that was before that, but okay, their economy will benefit, the Japanese will benefit, the CFR will take another step toward its objective of a one world government. As usual, the people will pay the price in lives and otherwise to grease the wheels of those who would take care of us and turn us into a nation of sheep. The implications of this kind of international manipulation are so far-reaching as to portend a mere insidious level of interference with unsuspecting populations. Closer to home, if we had wanted unilateral decision-making, we would have installed a king in 1989 instead of a president. Is it too late to breathe life back into the Constitution? Is America doomed to become USA Inc.? Isn't it time we neutralize the non-elected power that manipulates the strings of power in Washington, D.C.? Is there hope? Are we helpless against the secret combination that has us in a death grip? How as individuals can we hope to win against such enormous and impossible odds? 31 years ago.
What's that noise? Looks military to me. Definitely military. Probably classified too.
Dishfire, Prism, Century Eagle, Sigma, Mannequin,
Is there a name for that?
MK Ultra.
For that operation?
Operation Project
A Special Center for Action Intelligence report by Colonel Bo Gritz, 1990.
Bo Gritz. I bet Bo Gritz is black.
But I mean, I didn't want to get derailed because there's a big congratulations here for you and your book that just came out. So,
For me.
I mean, yeah, dude, we should be talking about
Oh,
that.
that's okay. We could save that for later.
No, let's do it. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
A Canadian Shame. So Darren just released his first book. Congratulations, buddy.
My first
It's
book.
going well, yeah.
Maybe my only book.
Maybe. No, you got another one in you.
Think so?
Yeah.
Maybe I
Yeah.
got another one in there.
You got some ideas.
Yeah, it came out on the
Volume
22nd.
Yeah, good. How's it going so far?
Seems all right.
Yeah.
There's a nice bump in the beginning. I sent out the newsletter and stuff. A bunch of people bought it. It's tough to say how many because they won't tell me until they ship. But, you know, it looks like, I think like 50 or so have shipped already. So that's a good start. I got a bunch of copies coming here to the house. I got to the head office. I guess this is head office as well. 60 coming to head office. Because we got the website up at CanadianShame.ca. You can go there. There's a button you can click to order signed copies if you want that, or you can just go to Amazon and get it there. And I hope you do, because I kind of had the option to maybe go down some publishing routes, and I decided against it. So now I'm hoping that doesn't turn out to be a huge mistake. So hopefully you guys can maybe rate it, review it, share it around. Buy a couple copies, give some away.
When do you foresee the audio version coming out?
Probably within 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
It's already submitted.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Holy.
So it's submitted and waiting for approval.
Wow, that's good.
So it should be within 10 business days as per their standard, and that'll be out on Audible and wherever else audiobooks. I think it's Audible, iTunes, and Amazon. I don't know the three places you can get that. Of course, the main place you get the book right now is Amazon. Until I get my copies. And like I say, I hope you do so we can bump it up. The other day when everyone was buying it bumped up into the top 1,000 books in Canada for a while. It's since fallen out after that bump. But if
you never know,
there's way more listeners than there is people watching the socials and everything else. So if all you guys go out and grab a copy or two and leave a review or a rating, then it would go a long way and maybe helping pushing it out into the algos.
Have we talked about the residential schools lately on this feed?
Was Annette on this one? No, I don't think we have.
Well, he was a year ago. I mean, that was a year ago. So we did touch this like just over a year ago at the beginning of COVID. Right. It would have been the spring of 2020. But I don't think we've talked about it lately a lot. But on our other show on The Outlawed, we did talk about it with Joanne Bean. And we also talked to Kevin and Annette again recently. We have another couple shows on it coming up. So what made you decide to write the book?
I'm not sure. I was kind of like, I couldn't.
Were you intrigued by the timeline of the Indian Act and stuff, or like?
I couldn't find the Indian Act. That was what really started. Is I couldn't find a good copy of the Indian Act online.
The older versions,
the original version. So I found a dude in India, ironically, to retype the whole thing for me. The 465 pages was all the Indian Acts, up until 1985, I think, which I still want a PDF, and I haven't got. I'm waiting for I'm locked out of the website right now, and the web developer is camping. So when he gets back on Monday, hopefully I can get in the website because I want to put all the PDFs that I've got now, and I'm going to make them all freely available on that website.
On the Canadian Shame website? On a Canadian Shame website?
Yep.
Okay.
CanadianShame.ca. I'll have the bibliography from the book there as well, and.
That's a good idea. And then the PDF of all the old Indian Acts.
Of all the old Indian Acts. Yeah.
So give us an example of what's some of the stuff that people don't really realize was in the Indian Acts from back then. Like,
well, you'd have to get the book, I guess. Well, the big one right now is the residential schools, because that's kind of forefront. Is that for up until the 60s, it was mandatory. From the late 1800s to the 1960s, it was mandatory to go to school. Boarding school or residential school from the time you were 6 or 7 until the time you're 16, sometimes 18, where you go and you'd stay away from your parents. Sometimes you had to go home at the summer. Other times you wouldn't. You'd maybe go to a working farm or something like that.
Wow.
And you weren't allowed to speak your own languages. You weren't allowed to, you'd be separated from your siblings. And you got raised into Christianity, you got given different names.
Given a number.
Names. Yeah.
Given a number, tracked.
Yeah, all that fun stuff.
Because there was a tracking thing before the residential schools, even right on the reserves, right? They were trying.
Well,
that
was never in the act though. The pass system.
Yeah,
that was just for like 40 years or 50 years. They were just doing that. They just implemented. It was never legislated, but they just implemented as policy where you couldn't leave the reserve without a pass.
Wow.
Which is maybe where we're headed now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're right back there. Hey, we just never learn, right? I mean, nobody really.
Well, I mean, that's kind of why it's good timing, is maybe
Exactly.
people realize that if we're not that far removed from all this craziness, then
Yeah. So let me get this straight, because it took me a while to really grasp it. I mean, I lived in near Indian reserves in Vancouver Island for a while. I didn't realize that this was happening back then. This would have been the 80s when I lived there. No, the 70s actually. 70s.
70s and 80s.
Yeah. So people, they would come and get it was mandatory.
Yeah, the Mounties would come and take you away.
Mounties would come and take kids from their parents,
throw them on a train or a plane,
and take them to these residential schools where they would stay and basically lose their culture.
Yeah, or someone would run away, and a lot of them would get tuberculosis and die.
Well, and then there's the whole. I mean, this gets into the controversial aspect of it, where your book has all these apologies in there from the Alberta premier, the two prime ministers. And they don't acknowledge the murder. They don't acknowledge any of the real nefarious stuff that happened.
It's very much just source documents. It's a lot of source documents in there, in the book. Source documents with a little bit of stuff in between.
Yeah. But you got the timeline of the Indian Act, and you got the timeline of
residential schools.
Other stuff, residential schools.
Few timelines in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty eye-opening. It really is pretty eye-opening how racist it was back then.
It crams it all into like 175 pages with the numbers up to today, and now it's sort of turned into the child welfare system, doing the same sort of thing.
Right. So this was happening over time. So there was also these unmarked graves are there from. So kids, sometimes Native kids wouldn't go home, but they'd be sent. They'd be said they were sent home, but they wouldn't make it home. That type of stuff. I mean, it seems to me like there was a lot of.
Who knows? I mean, I don't know if we'll ever know the whole truth of what went on, but I mean, the whole thing's seems to be at risk of going out the window right now. Like the whole history could very well sort of wipe away. The Canadian government's already sort of started to take all that off of their website.
Yeah.
You couldn't get the old versions of the act. I mean, that's how the book started. I started writing a bit of an intro into that, and it just sort of added pages and pages and pages.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I read this other book of a guest we're going to have on coming up, I hope. And it was very much getting into the UN and the definitions of genocide, and how, there was a real pushback to call it genocide because they didn't want to alienate the Western civilization. But I mean, it was a genocide. It was a cultural genocide, and it could be other genocides, but I feel like it really got snagged up in the definition of what that is at the UN,
Yeah, I found all the other books out there were kind of overwhelming. 300, 400, 500 pages when they don't really need all that. You don't need as much as, I mean, they're great books, but I wanted to kind of keep it all and not be
digestible
overwhelming.
A little bit.
You can get through it quickly. You can get through it in 4 or 5 hours, probably less. And it's very well sourced, and it's very well, the table of contents is very well, so you can easily use it to just sort of dart back through stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the big thing, and let's talk about the land a little bit, because we grow up thinking that everybody's equal now, and there's not any racism anymore, and all this, or at least in the 80s, that's kind of the way I grew up, in this little naive bubble, and that the Indians have the reservations, and they get no taxes, and they get all these benefits. This is what people think.
Yeah,
but there isn't the land, right? I mean, the land is still owned by the government.
The land is still owned by the crown.
By the crown. By the crown.
Well, I mean, all of it is still technically crown land.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
And that's, exactly. And that's what, 90% of Canada's land is crown land?
Well, it's either the crowns or the provinces, but I think I don't know how that works now. I wonder if the provincial public land is
overrides
Crown.
the crown, or if it's crown, yeah.
or if that's actually Alberta public land.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because I think the crown owns like 46%, and then maybe the provinces own 46% of the land.
But either way, it's 88% or something.
88% combined. And that includes all the reserves. So if you want to own land as an Indian, you have to leave the reserve and buy it.
Right. And that's one of their ways to get the reserves, get people off the reserves, get them assimilated, right? I mean, a big thing was assimilation.
I am assimilated.
You're assimilated, yeah. How does that feel?
I mean, it is what it is.
Privilege?
Not much I can do about it now. Write a book, I guess.
No, but I mean, this was their goal, right? Assimilation. And if you get people to assimilate, then they can pay taxes. They can own their own land, but then the reserve gets smaller and smaller, and there's less people on the reserves. So they end up,
And the problem goes away.
and the problem goes away, and the Indian
I
problem
might stop
goes away.
paying taxes, though. Then I'm taking my kids out hunting, whether the government issues them their treaty cards or not.
Yeah.
Because my tribe accepts them as members of the tribe, and I don't think that's the federal government's decision to decide.
Yeah. So I
think all that's going to switch soon anyway.
Well, we'll see what happens, but I don't think we're really close to any conciliation because
No, I don't think so.
the land issue will never, ever, ever, as far as the government of the crown's concerned. I mean, the world is going the opposite. I mean, they want more land. They want to take away land. They want to take away private land from a globalist perspective. You know, the freedom, inherent rights.
Yeah.
Freedom to have your own land. Like, it's not going the other way. So,
yeah, but it might. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. But you know what? I feel like we're up against, and you're up against this push to get rid of Western civilization as well and turn it into a globalist system of, you'll own nothing and be happy kind of thing.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't think we're close to that in Canada.
And then the childcare problem is a future, like a contemporary problem. Because
it's all contemporary problems. I mean, honestly.
No, but I mean, like, really recent. Like, recently there was, which you have in your book too, about what happened in Saskatchewan, was it?
Well, that's like 60s and 70s. But that leads right up to the 2016. The last census in 2016, it's still something like 50% of the kids in childcare.
Wasn't there just a shift, though, in the courts?
86% of the kids in Saskatchewan are First Nations, I think.
Wasn't there just
the Cowlitz
child
Nation
care
is
decision?
supposed to start getting control of their own child care.
Yeah. So that's a good step in the right
Well,
direction.
we'll see what happens.
What do you mean?
We'll see what happens.
What do you mean?
Well, nothing's happened yet. It's just words.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, they just said they were going to do that?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was actually documented. Like, I thought
So
it was
we'll
actually...
see what happens in 5 years
Right.
or 10 years or where it's at.
What, you think they'll stall that long?
Well,
for
I don't
this?
even know if you can trust the band council systems or not. So
Right.
we'll see what happens in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make any predictions.
Yeah,
on
right,
that.
right. Fair enough.
Same as I'm not going to make any predictions on globalist crackdowns or anything like that because I still don't think Canada has a powerful enough state to consider pulling that stuff off.
Well, I mean, we do feel like we've said this over and over and over again. We're in a little bubble here in Alberta. I mean, there's protests going on all over the world right now. I mean, all over Europe, Australia, London.
Well, we tried having a
it's-
protest here. I seen the guys protesting downtown.
I
It was
know, but
pretty pathetic.
what are you like you
Well,
said?
that's
What
what
are
I
you
said. There's
protesting?
nothing- it's wide
Like,
open.
We're open. We're open for business in a lot of ways.
Shut her
Like, there's no
down.
mask mandate. We're open for business. I mean, they said there's no vax passports, but I mean,
And you're up
that
there
could all
yelling
change.
up and down
I mean,
about variants. Well, then protest then. I mean, I guess you're protesting in solidarity.
yeah, that could be it. Yeah, which is
But-
good.
It's tough when your government's saying you're not going to have any vax passports, and if you don't want the shot, you don't need to get the shot, and everything's wide open. I mean, there's a couple stores that are still being fucking Nazis about it. Like Best Buy, I don't think will let you with them out of mask.
Then,
But then go protest Best Buy.
Yeah.
Or, even better idea would probably just not go to Best Buy anymore.
Yeah.
Boycott Best Buy.
yeah.
But it just came off as silly to be protesting in the park. And maybe if there would have been a whole bunch of them.
It's hard because you want people to be able to protest. And look, we've been through a lot in the last year and a half, so it's good that they're protesting because
I guess. But what do you
it's-
protest?
Well, I mean,
Trudeau. I guess Trudeau.
I mean, there is a lot of fear in the media. I mean, you could protest. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, like I said, man, it's the pandemic of the unjabbed. I mean, this is what the narrative is right now.
In our media?
Down south, our media's, I think, more scared of the variant probably right now. I don't know, because I don't pay attention to the media either, but I hear it through other people that I love. You know,
because I was right there. I might have walked across the street to check out the protest, but I was just like, well, what are we protesting at this point? We still have a chip on our shoulder for the old one, or maybe we're protesting Stampede, maybe. That could have been it. Could have been Stampede. There's a lot of people who weren't happy about that.
About what?
Stampede.
That it was on?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just unbelievable.
Half the people were mad that it was on because of COVID, and the other half of the people were mad that it was on because nothing else had been on up until then.
Right. Can we just divide though into what we want to do? Like, can everybody just do what they want?
I went Stampede,
twice
because it wasn't so crowded.
No, I mean like in general, like just if you want to have your rules and you have your restrictions and
little rules and your little regulations.
Then go ahead and do it.
Just restrict yourself.
And then just let all of us go.
You could just restrict yourself.
Yeah.
Restrict it.
Yeah.
When's your book going to be done?
I'm scared.
You're scared?
Yeah, I'm going through I'm working on my fear right now.
Some
about
apprehension?
Yeah. I sent it to a couple of people for feedback today, actually. Or no, I prepared it for sending it. I've got it like half done. But it's kind of weird, dude. Yeah.
Prepared it for sending.
Like just took it out of what I was writing it in and put it in a document to email it. That's all.
All right.
I'm putting my story into it, I think. So I'm writing out my story a little bit through addiction and intention work and all the synchronicities. Not all the synchronicities. I mean, but that's part of it, right? That's part of my story. So I'm writing it up on intentional recovery workings, basically. I guess if I say it out loud, maybe I'll
do it.
It'll help me finish it. But I've written quite a bit of it. I mean, it's going to be a small book, but it's kind of about intentional recovery groups, small intentional recovery groups using group intention work and alchemical meditations to basically peel away your false selves and become authentic and heal your addictions.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I look forward to reading it.
Yeah.
Speaking of reading, we had our first audiobook with Joe Roop come out. Joe Roop Thought Forms by Annie Besant. If you want to check out Audible, type in Grimerica, that'll pop up. Thought Forms, it's a short one. I think it's only like a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours, less than 3, I think even. You pop through it. Joe's sexy, sultry voice. Listen to him read a book for once. Couple new Graham ones out this week too. Well, I think that Art, Mysticism and Logic already came out, and Secret Doctrine 2 will come out this week.
Secret Doctrine 3 is being worked on right now, which is actually the best of all 3 in my opinion, but we'll talk about that later.
Hamlet's Mill will be 2 weeks still. I don't think it'll come out this week, probably not till the next week.
And then also what was the one? Secret Teachings of All Ages is out. Fantastic.
That's out
tome.
now. Yeah, if you guys head over to adultbrain.ca or just head over to Audible, if you're on Audible, and just type in Grimerica, they'll all pop up, which we ask you to do. Or you could type in Graham Dunlop, that'll pop up all the books he's narrated, including the ones that we didn't publish, some for Mark Sloan, some other ones for Eric P. Antoni.
Yeah.
You can check all that stuff out.
Yeah, check out his one.
And if you don't have Audible, you can get a free book. I think they give you a free book and a free month these days. So you can go check it out, listen to a book for free, and then bail.
Yeah, some of the meditations I did in the, and I've recorded those too. I'm going to put them on YouTube. But some of those alchemical meditations come from sort of reworked out of Eric P. Antony's book, Song of the Immortal Beloved, which is on. There's a new version coming up, the 3rd edition of that. It's a pretty deep book about spiritual alchemy. Check that out.
Absolutely.
Song of the Immortal Beloved.
Check out grimerica.ca/sport if you can, when you can. Of course, it's not a free show. It's a value for value show where we try and throw our value out into the world and see if it comes back, if it resonates with you guys, adds a little bit of value to your day, to your commute, to your work day, to your workout, wherever you're listening to the show.
And this is my job now.
Yeah, if the show is making it better, if you want to support Graham Podcast and full time, we ask that you do sign up for monthly, make a one-time donation. You can always head over to GrimericaOutlawed.ca where we have a bunch of other fantastic podcasts. 33 episodes. If you want to just listen to the free show, if you do go sign up for Plus over there, you'll get closer to 40. I think 39 now. There's Rockfin, grimerica.ca/rockfin.com/grimerica. Check that out. What else?
That's about it, I think. Yeah.
Check out the book if you can.
Chats.
grimerica.ca/chats. Appreciate you buying the book. If you can buy it, the sooner the better. Buy your friends a copy. Share it around. Do what you can. Support the show. And let's get a quote before we get out of here.
Oh, this is quite a long one if you want to do it. You want to do it? Oh, boy. All right.
It's the profound quote of the week. Darren, can you guess it?
Oh, I think I might have already told you who this quote's from.
The profound quote of the week.
This is from Bruce DeTorres' book, God, School, 9/11, and JFK. He was like our second or third latest release in Grimerica Outlawed. This is from the JFK chapter. Vocalism, measure, concentration, determination, and the divine power to speak words. Are you full-hunged, full-lunged, and limbered-lipped and long trial? From vigorous practice, from physique, do you move in these broad lands as broad as they? Come duly to the divine power to speak words. For only at last, after many years, after chastity, friendship, procreation, prudence, and nakedness, after trending ground and breasting river and lake, after a loosened throat, after absorbing eras, temperaments, races, after knowledge, freedom, crimes, after complete faith, after clarifying, elevations, and removing obstructions, after these and more, it is just possible there comes to a man, a woman, the divine power to speak words. Then toward that man or that woman swiftly hasten all. None refuse, all attend. Armies, ships, antiquities, libraries, paintings, machines, cities, hate, despair, amity, pain, theft, murder, aspiration, form in close ranks. They debauch as they are wanted to march obediently through the mouth of that man or that woman. Vocalism.
Bruce DeTorres.
No, Leaves of Grass. Walt Whitman.
Walt Whitman. I remember. But after that, you said Bruce has an old quote in here.
Yeah.
And now I can quote myself.
I was going to find one in your book, but.
Were you?
Yeah.
Would it have been one of mine?
Yep. There you have it.
There you have it. We love you guys. We hope you enjoy the interview. With who again?
Gary and Darcy. Gary King and Darcy
Crop
Ware.
Circles, baby.
Crop Circles and UFOs and Disclosure. And this came out.
I think they're both in Mexico.
We recorded this the day. Yeah, they are, I think. Yeah. We recorded this the day after that government UFO memo / sort of disclosure thing came out. Basically, we talk about it in the show, but basically they're admitting there's stuff they don't know and they want money to investigate.
That's right. Speaking, what's that come out?
What come out?
The documentary. One's already out. Aren't they making another one right now? They're doing something right now down there.
Yeah.
Or is he down there doing a podcast or some sort of a video show or something?
Yeah, there is that too. It's all in the show notes here.
It's all in the show notes. Yeah. He's pro. He's got pro show notes. Full-time podcaster Graham Dunlop. Grimerica.ca/support to keep him podcasting full-time. It'd be a real shame if he had to go back flipping bergs. All right. Enjoy the chat.
All right, we're back. We've got Darcy Weir with us. He's a filmmaker from Canada on UFOs and crop circles, and Gary King, who's a crop circle researcher as well. So I'm not going to say too much about your guys' bios. I won't read them all here. We'll get you guys to describe yourselves a little bit. But welcome to the show, and thanks for coming on to talk about all this fascinating stuff.
Thanks, Darren. It's good to be here, and Graham.
Yeah, awesome. Do you want to start, Darcy? Just a little bit about yourself, and
sure. So I've been making documentary films in the line of in the study of the UFO realm, so to speak. Excuse me. Breakfast is not that far away. And the very first documentary I ever produced was actually a bit of a biography on a guy that was doing lectures at UFO conferences back in the early 90s, a man by the name of Phil Schneider. And that documentary is called The Underground. It's basically just covering the theories and the history, the facts surrounding underground base building throughout the United States and different parts of the world post World War II. With the help of the Project Paperclip scientists, all that type of thing. Then the next sort of documentary I moved on to was covering Sasquatch, Bigfoot, which you guys might be familiar with. Sasquatch is the Canadian term for Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And that documentary found mainstream distribution in 2016, and then I sort of ramped up my production, and I've been releasing a few sort of documentaries ever since then, every year, covering different aspects of the UFO phenomenon, because, it's almost like a multi-layered onion. You got your UFO subject, you got abduction, you've got possible secret space activity that's going on, you've got underground bases, you've got possible collusion with off-world species, or government cover-up. There's so many aspects to this research that you can sit there and make a different documentary every day if you wanted. 365 days a year. So that's what I've been doing. I love this stuff. I think it's pretty interesting. Some of it's highly credible. Some of it's highly
incredible.
Yeah. Non-credible, I would say. And I think the cryptid subject has also been fun to discuss and analyze as well. I did 2 docs on that, and I'm releasing this. Well, the Crop Circle one came out in March, and I'm releasing a secret space documentary this month, in July.
Nice.
So
that'll be good. I'm looking forward to that.
Shoot you guys the link.
Yeah. So I guess I want to ask you a question about what you said, but before we do that, we'll get Gary in here. You want to explain a little bit about your background, Gary?
Sure. My name's Gary King. I used to be a lawyer. I ran a private investigation agency in London in the 90s. And then in 1997, I was taking time off work because I was a bit burnt out, and met a teacher from America who was sort of like a Tai Chi Qigong teacher who was over from the States in England, who was also visiting the crop circles. And I tagged along with him one day to Wiltshire. I was living in Cardiff at the time. It's about 70 miles away from Wiltshire. Went into a crop circle that had appeared the night before. And I suppose figuratively I could say I never really left after that. I've now been...
You've been there ever since.
I've been there ever since. I really got interested in I've always been interested in philosophy. And I was happy to discover that the ancient Greeks used geometry as a tool for philosophy many years ago. So I pursued more about what the meaning of the crop circles were, what the meaning of the symbols were, as opposed to trying to prove that it wasn't man or other stuff. I think I've comprehensively destroyed the argument about people making them. So for me, it's always been about what do they mean?
Yeah. So Darcy, how do you, like you mentioned, like incredible and credible and not so credible type of information. I mean, especially nowadays with all the, the disinformation and sometimes people throw shit out with the bathwater. Like, if somebody's talks about something that it's a known hoax or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're discredited. I mean, how do you address like that? How do you discern between incredible and not credible and that kind of thing? And how do you address it?
So, unfortunately, mainstream media is still ruling the story on many of these events that have happened in history. And crop circles, for example, have been attacked as just being man-made since the 1990s. The major campaign to debunk crop circles started with Doug and Dave.
Yeah.
Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley. And, the interesting thing is that crop circle formations started showing up in deeper and deeper complexity in vaster numbers right around that time. It was almost as if they arrived on the scene perfectly to close it up, package it up, and sell it to the public.
Yeah.
And in this latest documentary, we kind of talk a little bit about that. We talk about events where people have been convinced that they're completely debunked, but there's all kinds of facts that Gary brings to light about, for example, the East Field event, the one 777 that happened to him. He explains that they were the only ones on top of that hill. There was no one down below them that whole night. They were up till, almost midnight. Then they go to sleep for a few hours. There was this flash of light. The cameras pick it up that are planted there by a researcher. And as the light just creeps up, they see this massive, over 1,000 feet or meters, Gary?
1,000 feet.
1,000 feet in diameter field, a glyph, like massive, multiple linked, circled, perfectly shaped crop circle. So, it's events like that, and no one's there to account for making it. There's facts about how you would have made that, which Gary can go into, that would prove, it's almost impossible that somebody would pull that off going unnoticed without damaging the crop, and not leaving, tire tracks and all kinds of footprints and stuff leading away from the formation in the morning after they were done. But that's an anecdotal. There are massive hoaxes that have happened in this field for sure. And when you see them, there's out in the Chilbolton crop circle formation area, there's a famous alien head and a disc that is extremely complex. It looks like it's literally, 3D printed into the medium of a crop.
Yeah.
And there's another alien head formation that showed up in the south of England that just has the sort of gray alien, has the eyes, and it's like got its mouth open, and it's just one simple circle with its head in there. And that had all kinds of, first of all, it showed up way outside of the normal area that we see these messages show up year over year, which has a continuity of messaging. And then second of all, it looked poorly made, and it was a simple design. So you can tell, okay, some humans probably made that. But there's examples of really complex crop circle designs that have been made, especially, by the beer company Asahi, a Japanese beer company. And that crop formation that they made was just a simple beer label. It took, how long did it take, Larry? Or sorry, Gary?
Larry King, if only. It took 7 days from sunrise to sunset.
Oh, wow.
It took 40 professional engineers using very advanced technology, GPS technology. It's a system called Mazescape, which was developed in England, where you can project a design onto land from space. And then these guys walk around with these kind of poles to tell them where to whack in their stakes and mark the ground in readiness for them to actually cut out the crop using tractors and bush cutters. And it took these guys 7 days on completely flat field.
How big was that?
So it's an easy example. It was about 750 feet long. It's just a replica of the beer label, the acai beer. It cost them $1 million. So it gives you an example of what goes into actually laying down some crop to make a design. And from above, from the air, you think, it's a crop formation, right? But it's when you get down on the ground, you see that they just cut it out using tractors and bush cutters, that you realise that it doesn't bear any resemblance to what we know to be genuinely mysterious crop circles that appear in 3 or 4 hours of darkness in the summer months of Wiltshire.
I watched that. That's what I liked about your show. I watched that crop circle one, and you guys really get into there's a lot of testing that goes on. Like you can discern the difference between one that's man-made and one that's not. And it seems like everybody makes sure that that's looked at prior to there's a difference that you're going to treat them differently when you're analyzing the design, when you're analyzing all that stuff, right? If you know they're human. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you guys figure that out?
Well, one of the added complexities I'll just add to the creating a crop circle or a agroglyph, as some people call them, that can be seen from above. And it looks perfect. It looks, symmetrical from above. One of the added complexities is the terrain that you're working on. And Gary's walked through many, many different, he's been researching for over 20 years. He's walked in over 900 formations as they've shown up over the years. And we discussed one crop circle formation that showed up in a canola field. It was like a big 3D cube revolving in the middle of a sort of flower-shaped circle around it, right? And that canola field formation that showed up that he walks into and analyzes is on a hill. So there you go. You're working on an uneven surface, and yet you're able to make this perfect in the cover of night without destroying the plants. That's the other thing. Canola plants are like celery stalk. They're really thick. It's not like just some simple hay. And that acai marketing campaign that was done, that took all those men, all that time, all that technology, and that was made on a flat field of hay. Okay, so I'm thoroughly convinced that some of these are showing up in ways that just are mind-boggling to us, and definitely are not made by us.
Is that the same one that shows up the next season as well?
Oh, you're thinking of the Phantom. Yeah.
The Phantom one, yeah.
That was Clay Hill in 2017. That showed up in just a standard field. Was that barley or was that wheat, Gary?
It was
the first year.
It was a wheat field. Okay,
I'll let Gary explain this one.
Yeah, ghost. What we call them ghosts, phantasms. They're where a crop circle appears 1 year in one particular crop, like wheat, for example, with the Clay Hill formation, and then the following year we can see, when we fly over, we can see a ghost or a shadow of the crop circle that was there from the year before. I researched this quite heavily, and on some occasions, what happens is that people visit the crop circle, and when they trample around inside, looking around inside it, they knock the seeds off the heads. Those seeds go into the ground and germinate and create a root mat. And then the following year, farming, when they plant seeds these days, they use seed drills. So a big machine goes along and it drills the seed into the ground, and it will invariably the following year it will be a rotation of crop. It will be canola, which is a much bigger seed.
We lost him there for a bit.
I'll continue quickly. I think I know what he's going to say. Basically, because of the activity that's produced from us walking around.
Yeah, us walking around kind of does it. And so that to me is a very reasonable explanation for what can be the ghost, the appearance of the ghosts. But it doesn't explain a number of them. For example, the Clay Hill one, because people don't walk around on every square inch of the crop circle. They typically walk down the middle of the avenues. And whilst there'll be some spread of the seeds, it won't delineate the lines, because they just don't walk over every square inch. They're too vast for them to do that. That's number one. And number two is I've got several photographs of flights that were taken in February. So the crop season ends around August, September. Then we have the winter months where the fields are barren. And then in January, February, March, we'll get snow often in the UK. And you fly over the landscape and the whole landscape is white. But where the design of the crop circle is, you can still see the perfect geometric shape because the snow won't settle where the crop circle has appeared. So that doesn't get explained by the root mat theory.
What do you guys think? I mean, do you think that, especially with all this, I do want to ask you about the sort of disclosure document that came out. I mean, I don't know if you guys would even consider that disclosure or whatever, but I mean, since you guys are on here and you kind of do shows on UFOs and the crop circles are connected to UFOs, I mean, I read through that. What do you think? I mean, and then I'd like to get into, I mean, if this is, an ET thing or not, or if it's technology that we just don't even and can't comprehend
or if we can talk back to him. I mean, remember we talked to the circle maker years ago. I forget his name even. Matt something, maybe?
Maybe. I can't remember, yeah.
And I was going to we have crops like a couple hundred feet this way. And I want to make a Grimerica crop circle. Mostly just for branding and marketing. Graham is very against the idea. Very against. So I'm curious, we've got your guys here. What about these humans? Because we know... First of all, I'm looking at some of these, and I agree that some of them are just too crazy. Just too crazy, unless there's this giant underground crop circle crew that this is their life, and they just like live for making crop circles. Maybe that's a thing. That could be a possibility, but I don't think so. But humans are making a bunch of these, obviously. So which came first? Because, I mean, there's so many ancient rituals that would have left weird patterns in the dirt, the dancing rituals, the different things like that. So you wonder if, do you guys have an instance on which came first? Did the crop circles from humans come first, or some sort of the Nazca lines type things, and then the crop circles started coming, or is it the other way around? Because I feel like ancient man didn't have a way to appreciate them.
They need to be seen from above. They're not appreciated like the Nazca lines. You have to rise above them to be able to see them. When you're standing inside them, you can't tell what they are at all.
Oh, okay.
When they first began to appear in the 70s, they were just simple standalone circles, which and when I use the word simple, a lot of people don't understand the profundity philosophically of what is a circle. But you would find... So we take flights over. I wasn't around at this time, but colleagues who would take flights across the landscape of southern England, and you would see thousands of these circles, as if someone had flicked a paintbrush across the landscape and made all these perfect circles. And as Darcy was alluding to earlier, most of the terrain of this area is not flat ground. It's undulating, uneven ground. And so they're not actually circles when you measure them. They're ovals, so that they look like circles from above. So whoever constructed these formations in these early days knew that the topography of the land had to be considered so that people would appreciate them as circles. And that largely went unreported for a very long time. There were just a few researchers, Colin Andrews, Pat Delgado, and Busty Taylor, who was a pilot, who flew around at that time and started to document them. So I can't definitively say whether people decided what we'll do is go out into the fields and make thousands and thousands of circles, and over the next 20 years we'll get the public interested. And once they do get interested, then we'll start advancing into more complex geometry. My view is that people didn't start making them until the phenomena took off. And then we needed an explanation, one that gave us a way of being able to let it go. Because I've seen a lot of people go quite crazy when they try to hold on to the fact that this isn't a man-made enterprise. When you don't have an explanation, I mean, a lot of people make the leap to UFOs and aliens. That must be aliens, right? If it's not man, it's got to be aliens, right? You don't have this place where you can hover in the middle and go, well, I don't know, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. A lot of people can't handle mystery in that way. They need to know. And so I think that the man-made thing is a way of giving people a good get-out to just be able to say, okay, it's man-made, I can get back to the football and get back to paying the mortgage and so on. I suppose I would add to that with over 7,000 plus crop circles worldwide, and the vast majority of those being in southern England, I'm always, because I'm considered to be an expert on crop circles, I'm always asked when a crop circle appears, is this one man-made? Is this one man-made?
Yeah.
And it's almost like, it's like Christmas presents, right? You want to rip off the wrapper and throw it over your shoulder once you've got someone else's opinion. But if you consider the 7,000 and you say, okay, let's make 3 piles of photographs on the table in front of us here. Let's put the ones over there that we think are man-made, right? Because they had damage to the crop and they weren't very geometrically perfect and so on and so forth. Let's put those over there. Let's put the ones we're not sure about in the middle, and let's put the ones over here to the right that we absolutely cannot explain because the crop wasn't damaged, it's geometrically perfect, it solved a mathematical problem that hasn't been solved in history before, such as squaring the circle, and we just don't know where they are. Let's talk about those. Let's talk about those ones. And very few people want to.
Really? Because that's exactly what goes through my mind when I'm watching your movie. I'm thinking we need to separate all these out. But then there's the consciousness aspect of the people that have even made them man-made. Sometimes, where do they get the shapes from? Where do they decide what to do? I mean, we've heard those instances of people predicting one that's man-made that happens, or people manifesting them through their consciousness somehow. I mean, it's just not as simple.
That's one of the interesting things is that the people who claim they make them, and then let me say this straight out, there are people that go out and make crop circles, and some of them are very good. They say that there cannot be another intelligence that acts invisibly. It only acts through us. So we just get this weird inspiration at 10 o'clock at night after we've left the pub, right, to get our boards and rush out in the field, and we're possessed by this intelligence that makes us make the crop circles. That's their explanation, okay? So, but when you say, well, is it possible that this intelligence can do it without you guys, right? It can just, if it's this supreme being. No, it's not possible. It can only do it through us, right? And then when you question these guys, right? Okay, so this one that is laying on this ground that is uneven and so on. How did you formulate the radius of that? Or what went on with the geometry of making that circle? And you mentioned like pi r squared and simple things that you learn in high school, and then you find these guys don't know what pi r squared means. So then they jump to this explanation, we don't need to know that, right? Because we get possessed by these entities that make us make them. And so to me, that's an extraordinary claim.
It's more extraordinary than them being made by some other means. I mean, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And Carl Sagan once said, extraordinary claims requires extraordinary evidence. Well, I've only ever asked these people over 25 years to give me very ordinary evidence to make a crop circle in front of us, to do one of the designs that we've seen and under the same conditions of darkness and not damage the crop.
Yeah.
And they never, ever, ever have. We even put up £100,000 reward saying, make this crop circle, and nobody stepped forward to do it. So I just want ordinary evidence to substantiate their extraordinary claims.
Do you think there's have you guys doused these areas at all, or do you think these are connected to ley lines at all, especially being in the UK where there's all these, there's all the legends of the ancient stuff and the megalithic sites, and ley lines.
There's a number of people that, I'm not a dowser, but there's a number of colleagues, friends, peers that I know that have dowsed them. They say that they are on energy nodal points and so on and so forth. I believe in Chinese medicine, and science hasn't been able to sufficiently explain the meridian system in the body yet, or discover or locate it. But I believe it exists because the medicine's been around for sort of 8,000 years. So I'm, and they talk about dragon lines and so on, the Chinese. So I'm quite happy to believe that there are these energy points around the landscape that the crop circles use and interact with. One other thing that Lucy Pringle, the researcher, veteran researcher, who's been around for years, she's done some scientific research which shows that people who enter, it was a discovery made by accident, actually. Somebody with Parkinson's went into a crop circle and they found that their dyskinesia, their shaking, had stopped for 24 hours. Or not stopped, but been greatly reduced. And so that spurred Lucy into doing some scientific research where she went along with a professor from Stanford and some other scientists, and they monitored people's brainwave activity before they went into a crop circle, when they were in there and when they left. And they found that that there's a spike in gamma activity in people's brains when they go into crop circles. And interestingly, latest research on Parkinson's has been that they're experimenting with stimulating gamma activity in patients to reduce their dyskinesia.
Wow.
So there's been a kind of correlation. So, there's that kind of, slightly more than anecdotal evidence because it's been done by peer-reviewed scientists. And you have to add the caveat that most respected scientists, as soon as you mention crop circles, that you're doing crop circle research, they run a mile because of the stigma that's attached with being involved in anything like that. But the ones that have got engaged have found this evidence to be more than statistically chance that people get affected by energies when they go in them.
It seems to be changing. Oh, go ahead, Darcy.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to answer a couple questions a little bit late here. I wanted to make sure I had all the facts up in front of me first. But sorry, I'm just getting to know you guys. So you're Graham?
I'm Graham, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Darren.
Yeah.
So Darren asked, which comes first, right?
Yeah.
People making crop circles or the crop circles appearing. And, the interesting thing that Gary brought up was intention. I think he mentioned, and you guys also mentioned intention, something.
And that's what Darren's getting at, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a history of intention with crop circle formations showing up. If we go way back before the 1970s, there's the story of the devil shall mow.
Yep.
This happened in 1678. And there was supposedly a argument between a rich farmer and a poor farmer. We have the old copper tablets from the early printing press proving that this was a event that happened. And the rich farmer's property was donned with this circle, this crop circle, and it was said to be done in perfect symmetry. It was laid out. There was some other phenomenon of orbs or fires above the crop shown the night before, which we've heard of crop circles having orbs present whenever they've been revealed to the public. And some of those are shown, the orb videos have shown up on video throughout, the 2000s and such. But this story is a story of intention. One farmer wanted to eventually actually mow the field, and the other one just said, screw it. I don't even care anymore. I'd rather the devil mow the field than you help me. And it got mowed. There was an intention there. The formation showed up, and this is something that does happen. There are humans out there that have manifested crop circles in modern times, that have wanted to see a crop circle, and they have appeared. I was talking to somebody recently, a British guy, Graham, He wrote Silver Screen UFOs, but he
Yeah,
told
we
me
know who you're talking about. We've had him on the show. Nichols, maybe? No.
no.
No, that's his name starts with an R, doesn't it? Roger.
yeah,
Robbie Graham. So, yes, there we go. We pulled it together. So he told me he never believed in crop circles, but he believed in the power of intention.
Right.
And that formation that showed up where it was obviously man-made, that it was a gray alien head just perfectly in the middle of a little circle in the crop, that showed up just down the road from him, like pretty much a month after he said, this summer I want to go and see a crop circle. I want to actually do a bit of investigation into it. And he wrote a whole article on Mysterious Universe on their website about this strange event. People can Google it, and Robbie Graham, crop circle, Mysterious Universe. And he talks about how he made the intention, it manifested itself, and there was some kind of creepy guy there to, I don't know, it's a funny story anyways, but I'm just saying that there's intention at least, and sometimes people also see elements of the UFO phenomenon happening. And so I would like to think that we're not floating around on this like cosmic starship we called Earth and we're alone in the universe. I'd like to think that there's other intelligence out there that's trying to interface with us. And I think crop circles are a bit of a loophole. If you think about the long history that we've had engaging with them in our own skies with military forces, trying to shoot them down, very aggressively. We don't want them in our airspace. We consider this ours. Crop circles and maybe the technology that is used to deploy some of them, I'm not saying all crop circles, but this is my theory, might be a way of sending a message to us that's super peaceful. It's not something you can shoot down. You can only cut it down. And the ones that show up under super mysterious circumstances that are still growing, that aren't, damaged by wood boards and rope, which we know Doug and Dave used to make theirs, and other crop circle makers have made who are human. They seem to stand the test of time in terms of proving that there's some other intelligence making these with a technology that's a little bit different from ours. It seems like the crop is sometimes almost bent to some kind of force. And Gary's talked about this before, that W.C. Levengood, a scientist from state of Michigan, he actually did a lot of samples of different crop formations that showed up over the years. And he actually was involved in researching the 777 event that Gary witnessed himself. And what W.C. Levengood noticed in many of these crops, and later he created a patented technology off of this. He noticed that there was plasma energy inside of the soil, or there was maybe not inside of it, but it looked like the effects of what plasma energy could do to the crop and to the soil that's sitting under it. And interestingly enough, I've been talking to a UFO researcher, Larry Lowe, recently, and I was talking the other day to the gentleman involved in the Rendlesham event in the UK, John Burroughs. And both of them have information regarding the UK's UFO study. They did their own UFO study. We're not even talking about the information drop that happened yesterday, which was pretty negligible. But in the UK study, they surmised that this UFO activity exhibits very noticeable plasma radiation wherever it goes. They also noted in this UK study that there's a certain signature of radiation in this plasma that was exhibited at the Rendlesham event and possibly was exhibited by other events around the world that have been notable UFO events that are hard to debunk.
Huh. That's fascinating.
And yet W.C. Levengood and other researchers that are credible scientists that have approached this phenomenon seriously have also noticed what they would say are characteristics of plasma interacting with the crops. I think there's a connection.
Can I just go back on Darren's point, because I kind of went off on a tangent about communicating back?
Sure.
Is that okay? Yeah, you talked about doing a brand logo and making a crop circle to kind of communicate back, and many people have made the suggestion and indeed tried it. Weetabix have done it, and, you know, Richard and Judy, the two TV hosts in the UK, and a bunch of other stuff. But if somebody spoke to you in a language that you don't understand, do you think that communicating back to them with an English logo is an appropriate response to a language that you don't understand? Or do you think that we should understand what the language is about first?
I think you understand by interacting and experiencing.
So if you interact with a Russian person and you don't speak Russian, eventually you'll understand what he's saying.
Yes. Yeah. Give us a month together in the bush, and I think after a month we'll be communicating on a level that's passable, and within 6 months we'll be communicating on a fairly high level.
Yeah, what happens in language studies with that, when the British took slaves from Africa, one of the ways they kept them organised was to bring people together, 800 slaves or whatever, who didn't speak the same languages because they couldn't communicate, they couldn't rebel. And what you say is correct. After 6 months, they began to speak like a kind of pidgin and then a Creole kind of language mixed with the English that they heard from the slave owner, and mixing words that they kind of understood between each other. But this is a written form of language in a language of form. Of predominantly, there's 5 categories: geometry, philosophical and religious symbols, animals and nature, astronomy, and then a completely abstract form. And I went back to university in 2004 to study language and communication to try and get an understanding of meaning. And geometry is considered to be number in space. A square is 4 and a triangle is 3, and so on. And when you bring certain forms together, they either work harmoniously or disharmoniously. It's not like an alphabet, which represents the sounds we make. It's actually a language that's embedded into nature, the Fibonacci sequence, and so on and so forth. So before I understood what these crop circles were sort of talking about, I had to understand that they were talking about a language that seems to be embedded in reality. But after 25 years, I really don't know how I would respond to that by solving, for example, square and the circle problems more convincingly, or so on and so forth. So I don't see what a branded logo, like your logo or Weetabix's logo or whatever, would do to comprehensively respond to the language that they're using.
Mine would mostly be for marketing. I'm hoping it'll get in the paper. But, I would say if you're trying to communicate with them, you'd want to be doing things like the Fibonacci sequence or
sacred geometry,
things like that. What about cymatics? Do you think cymatics are some sort of force like that could be playing a role here? I mean, in some of them at least?
What cymatics reveals to us is that there is an order to nature based on whole number musical ratios. Pythagoras was credited with understanding that music is made up of whole number ratios. Apparently, the story goes that he was walking past a blacksmith's office and he heard the blacksmith hitting the anvil. And you got these 2 tones which were the same but different. And so he went into the blacksmith's office and said, "Why am I hearing these tones?" And when the blacksmith told him that he was using a 6-pound hammer and a 12-pound hammer, Pythagoras immediately realized there was a 2-to-1 ratio in an octave, what we hear. So if you take a length of string, for example, the E string, the top string on a guitar, the whole string, you pluck it, you get an E. If you put your finger at the halfway point, dividing it into 2-to-1, pluck it again, you get an octave, an E higher. So there is a relationship that comes from the seven liberal arts, the study of the seven liberal arts, where geometry is is number in space, but music is number in time. And our consciousness seems to be wired to recognize these whole number ratios, which make up the musical scale. Even if you don't understand music, someone throws in a bum note, you get it, right? You know that there's a bum note in there, even if you don't understand it. And music is made up of these whole number ratios just by simply the lengths of a string, 3 to 1, 2 to 1, 4 to 1. And then when we look out into the cosmos and we see the relative sizes of the orbits of the planets and the relative distances between the planets, they are all whole number ratios, which is where the harmony of the spheres terminology came from. So we see what's embedded in nature, and we are a part of nature, and we have the ability to look out at nature and scratch our heads and figure it out. We find that we are a reflection of all of that that's out there, and that's why we recognize music to be harmonious or disharmonious, just like geometry.
Fantastic. Man, there's so many places to go here. So I guess getting back to the UFO thing and what you said, how people don't want to look at the crop circles. And I mean, this has been going on for years, decades now. I mean, do you think there's been an increase in interest or acceptability to the mystery with the whole soft disclosure that's been happening since, this UFOs have been accepted in the mainstream media a little bit? I mean, I've even had friends say, hey, oh yeah, I saw it in the New York Times, new UFOs are real now. You're not so crazy, that kind of thing. I mean, this really is getting to the point where people are accepting the mystery a little bit more. So they must be accepting crop circles a little bit more in the last couple of years.
I don't think crop circles are at that point yet. UFOs are something people's minds can attach to a lot easier than this phenomenon, just because it's a craft, or at least people assume that it's something that's hovering around, flying, and people can conceptualize that pretty well. Crop circles, again, mainstream media has won the war on that. And, Doug and Dave Chorley did their damage in the 90s, and ever since it's been said that they're man-made.
Wow.
It's a very sort of subculture narrative that crop circles may be made by a different intelligence than us.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like it's not a very, there's people, you even go to, I was at a conference, the UFO mega conference, a week and a bit ago. And, a lot of people think that crop circles are nothing but man-made art. And then you tell them well, what about the message that was sent to space by Carl Sagan in 1974? And we got a really intricate answer to that in the form of a agroglyph in 2001. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, seriously. There was a message that was encoded and sent through the Arecibo, telescope, the radio telescope that's massive and now completely destroyed out in Puerto Rico. That shot into the stars our calling card. We got a calling card returned in 2001. You can look it up. It's just the Arecibo reply, or Chilbolton crop circle 2001. And it showed up with 2 formations in one night. No one came forward and said, oh, we made that and this is what it means. We had to decipher what it meant, and we only figured it out over a number of years. So there is messaging. Darren was saying, can we send a message to them? And apparently somebody received a different technological sort of message we sent out to space, and they sent back a peaceful one that has been widely reported within the UFO community, but on mainstream news you never hear about it really. Yeah. It's a joke.
Yeah.
So UFOs, the soft disclosure that's happening now is more of a confirmation. It's not disclosure the way that we would fully want it to be. It's just confirming, look, we know that something's going on in our skies. You've given us a year to prepare, this document. So this is what we can do in that time. It wasn't it was less than a year. But if you're an illiterate on the subject, you would think that that's all the military knows at this point. But we know, post 1947, there's been an active cover-up every decade that's gone on since then, and there's been many highly credible UFO events that have been recorded to the military, the Navy, every intelligence agency out there, research agencies like NASA know about it. It's all a cover-up, and we're just getting this confirmation for the public, for the masses, so that they can slowly start to do things that are in their favor. And this is also a ploy to attract public acceptance for military funding in the public. This is what you would call white budget funding.
That's the sense I got. Yeah.
Not black budget funding.
Yeah.
And everything that's happened in the past has all had to been black. But we're at this point in our time, there's so many types of technology that are surrounding us every day. And in order for us to start to go into space and start to do these things that we've been supposedly not doing, but that we're going to be doing in a public way, we need to have this subject out there publicly and said to be studied publicly and funded, therefore publicly, for certain types of technologies to start to leak into the public, so that our minds are just exploding when things beyond the Starlink and the Tesla technology and the hyperloops and all that stuff start being constructed. That's just like this scratching the surface of the types of technologies that the military industrial complex have been testing without public view. And if we're going to start to get some of that leaked within the public, we need to have this confirmation and then start to make inroads towards that publicly. And that's what To the Stars Academy was. They said one of their missions with Hal Puthoff and Kit Green and, scientists in that organization publicly, their mission was to try and make technology public that is what we're seeing the militaries interact with in the skies. That's we're just seeing, even though TTSA has been pretty much disassembled, we understand it's still going on. That intention is still there to carry out everything that they had set out to do from the beginning.
So you're talking about the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the preliminary assessment on unidentified aerial phenomena, right? Which was yesterday. So before I have a bunch of questions and comments on that, do you want to talk about that at all, Gary?
Well, it's pretty much what I expected it to be. I haven't read it yet, but I've been having, let's say, vigorous debates with Jaime Maussan here in Mexico about what he thinks is going to be disclosed and what I think is going to be disclosed. And I've been saying for several months that, along with what Darcy says, that it's going to justify more increased military spending in the white arena rather than the black arena about these things, and it's not going to appease most ufologists or people that have been, dedicating their lives. I mean, some of the footage I see, we've done 5 shows. I translate the shows from Spanish to English that we broadcast here for Terza Millennio, and we're on the 5th installment now of the CIA disclosure. I published it yesterday, the 5th investigation that's been done by a journalist here called Ruben Villatoro and Alfonso Salazar. They've painstakingly gone through these CIA disclosure documents. And there it is, right? You've got military aircrafts that are flying at UFOs, scrambled from various bases around the world, shooting at these aircrafts and so on, and then these things just zip off in a second, defying the laws of physics, make right-angled turns that if there was any kind of sentient being inside would be squished based on the laws of gravity. This stuff's been around for ages, and so we're looking now at a report that says, yeah, there's something there. We don't know what it is. We're going to look into it, and we'll let you know.
What CIA disclosure docs are you talking about? Is that from the reading room, like the CIA reading room, or?
Yeah. You remember they did a big dump recently.
They released it in June, beginning of June.
No. There was stuff that was released earlier on in the year that was like just after they.
January. I'm sorry, January.
So this is my
J's wrong.
Is this in the same read the CIA reading room that they had from before? They just added more to it.
It was released, and it was all kind of pretty difficult to decipher. It was on old technology, and it meant that someone's got to, be nerdy and sit down and go through it all and piece it together. And so, this guy, Alfonso Salazar, is a bit of an expert. He's an aeronautical expert, and he's also been involved in the UFO phenomenon for years. And, some of the journalists that Jaime's got working for him are pretty au fait with the subject. So they've painstakingly gone through these reports and pieced them together. And I think, we did the 5th installment yesterday. When I translate it to English and then I create the voiceovers to put it out there, and we put it with graphics and all the rest of it, and some animation and some of the stuff. There's no footage that's been released, but it's it's authenticated military stuff where the CIA investigated, and it's incredible, and it's far, far, far more comprehensive and startling than what we've seen in this disclosure document yesterday.
Can you send me links to that, by the way, before we? It'd be good to see that before I forget. And I'll put it in the show notes for people. Go ahead, Darcy.
Sure.
Oh, I was going to say, I've read a bunch of that stuff too, and it's the best information we've ever received. The funny thing is that researchers like John Greenwald or Stanton Friedman have come forward in the past, and they've asked for, Freedom of Information Act documents on certain events that we know that the military has collected, the Air Force or, the Navy have collected information on. And all they send back is a sheet of paper with the title and everything else blacked out, redacted, so that nothing can be used against them in proving that that was a credible UFO event. So yeah, the CIA documents are crazy. I mean, I read 2 cases. One case was in Sweden, where a craft was observed, and another case was in Russia. And that just right there proves, if the CIA is collecting UFO events from around the world in other countries, they're dealing with other intelligence organizations from outside of the United States. They're definitely dealing with Canada. We know that NORAD has plenty of UFO documents that they've collected over the years, and Canada is part of NORAD. This means that what people like Stephen Bassett have been saying for years, that there's this truth embargo. And what the truth embargo really means is that there's a NDA in place between many countries, intelligence agencies, and the United States military and industrial complex, their intelligence agencies. And that NDA, non-disclosure agreement, is saying, you guys can't release this stuff to the public. You can send us your information. We can work together and try and figure out what this stuff is when it happens. But we're saying, don't say a thing, because this is destabilizing to our paradigm. This is destabilizing to how we run the economies, how we run the social psyche of our countries. So don't release this information. That's what it means to me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, and they don't mention any of that in this report. It says nothing about the civilian reporting, the civilian tracking, all the decades of work that we've been doing in the community over the years, or like what you said, all the other intelligence agencies and all the CIA. Nothing about any of that. It's just, yes, there's some anomalous stuff going on here. We're gonna investigate in AI, invest in AI and machine learning bullshit to figure out more of it, so do you consider it disclosure though? I mean, could you not say that this is like capital D disclosure? I mean, this is what the public
capital D disclosure is. we know that there's aliens, or we know that there's we know
the
artificial intelligence that's not from our planet that's interfacing with ours.
Okay, so this would be like
I would go further than that. I would say capital D disclosure is saying we have actively, not only do we know that there's stuff there, but we have actively covered it up. We have in the early days we sent guys around to threaten you and said, look, if you say this, we're going to ruin your career. And then we created a culture where if you mentioned it, stigma was attached to you that said, you're a crazy person, or you're mad, or you're bad. You're a bad person that's trying to sell books or whatever.
Yeah.
When they come out and say, we did this to you and we've done this to you for the last 70 odd years, then I would say we've got capital D disclosure.
Okay,
at the moment we've
fair.
got completely decontextualized videos, these grainy grey videos or green videos with a little triangle on. You couldn't get a piece of communication that's more decontextualized that means nothing when ordinary people who don't really know much about it look at it, compared to what we know is really out there.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. So Darcy, this kind of goes into your SSP work, right? Your upcoming thing, which I'm looking forward to seeing on the Secret Space program and all that. I mean,
sure.
How does that connect to all that?
So that is just, if you talk about this truth embargo, you talk about this NDA, non-disclosure agreement that I believe is in place, then you have to extend that law that must have been written at some point in time by the militaries, by the intelligence agencies, to keep this information from also getting out from our research agencies. And a perfect example of that research agency would be NASA. NASA, as people may note, is a public research space agency. But that's not what it is. It's a tool of the military-industrial complex. It's the tip of the spear when it comes to gathering data from space. And space is the ultimate frontier that the United States, we know this has been documented since the 1970s, since they first started formulating the concept of the Star Wars program, which was announced under Ronald Reagan's administration. These things have been talked about within the military for a long time. And the major onset, the major term and the major sort of mission for them was, we must dominate space in order to dominate the planet. That's what the Americans' space research really was all about. They wanted to make sure that they were at the frontier before everybody else, that they understood it before everybody else, they understood what was out there before anybody else, so that they could control it better than anybody else. And secret space is not about Captain Falco and his square being alliance, or cube being alliance being out there. I'm trying to get around a lawsuit by bringing up stuff that's shown up on Gaia before, but it's not about this mythical race of aliens that are trying to come and save planet Earth from ourselves. To me, secret space is a well-documented history of militarizing space, researching space, observing UFOs in space since the onset of traveling to space. We're talking 1960s, when the very first X-15 space plane was built. This was a plane that was attached to the side of a bomber, to a wing of a bomber. It launched off of it, went into space, and these were the very first designations of a NASA astronaut. It was a combination between the Air Force and NASA to carry out the X-15 missions. And since the very onset of space exploration, even though that was just scratching the surface, we were seeing UFOs, and the pilots document that they see those UFOs. They took pictures, they took film, and since the very first X-15 mission, they were told, when you go back up there, part of your mission is to collect more UFO data.
Huh.
Yeah. And that's NASA in collaboration with the Air Force. And that's the starting of the program. And NASA has had research studies that they've done in collaboration with military think tank organizations. I can mention the Brookings Institute. In 1960, in December, they assembled the best of their scientists, and the Brookings Institute, and they did a study. What would happen? What are the proposed implications of mankind going into space and learning things that are completely different from our normal paradigm of thinking? And the two major things that they concluded in that study, which absolutely had to be kept from the public, okay? This is a study that lays the foundation for classifying information regarding UFOs and energy, exotic energy, or energy sources that are more than just burning shit, which is what we've been doing for the past hundreds of years, thousands of years, is the two major points that they concluded in that study just before they started the X-15 missions and going into space as a space agency was we must at all costs keep from the public energy discoveries that are related to, at that time it was nuclear atomic rocket energy technology, and face-to-face meetings with extraterrestrials. And then additionally to that, you have the military industrial complex way back in the Eisenhower administration creating one of the very first executive orders. Under the Trump administration, there was, I felt like, a executive order being signed into effect every half day of the year. But, executive orders were pretty rare back in the day. And Eisenhower signed into effect Executive Order 10501. You can Google that. You can pull it up. You can read every single information, every piece of that executive order. And that was the very first law that allowed intelligence agencies like CIA, FBI, you name it, NSA, and research agencies. Because like I said, NASA is a research agency that is going to, whenever they get data, they're going to link that data back to who? Intelligence agencies, and eventually to academic institutions. But it doesn't just go right from NASA to an academic institution. No way. When you look at that document, they say that they're trying to safeguard the national interest and the security of the United States. And by safeguarding, they mean protecting our way of life. And in 1952, that's a very simple way of life by today's standards. We have so many things that have upped the ante since then. Women's rights, multiple race rights, all kinds of things that we've done leaps and bounds in terms of our socio and intellectual development. But back then, they feared that certain things could come out, which are exemplary in the Brookings report, like energies or things that could damage the social psyche, socioeconomic nature of the United States economy. And those would be, again, energy, or the announcement that, there is something out there that's more advanced than us, more intelligent than us, and we are but ants compared to them, you know?
How does the private institutions figure into that though? I mean, the who's flying around in all these massive black triangles then? I mean, and what if they go up there in that X-15 and they see people that are already up there in this other secret space program that has been developed in the past under the US, their current NASA might not even know about, and then is there a deep state? Right now, is there a deep state battle over not disclosure so much as the narrative? I mean, Trump came out with Space Force, but I mean, Clinton and Podesta wanted to just, they came up with the whole UAP thing publicly before Trump got elected. It feels like they've, even Podesta's getting involved again now somehow. But I mean, I feel like there's a battle over the narrative, but what about the non-governmental space program? Like, to me, it should all be been in private by then.
So if you're talking about like black budget, black projects, that's the money that's funneled through the military industrial complex into testing out things. For absolutely sure, I'm confident that there are members of NASA that would know about these projects. But because of the nature of how you don't have the right to access this information just because you're part of NASA, it's deeply, deeply compartmentalized, some of these projects. So maybe a team of scientists within NASA who are specially selected, possibly were put into working for NASA throughout the years by the military industrial complex. That happens. You have scientists that are transferred from certain wings of the defense agencies into some of these research agencies. I mean, if you look at Kit Green, for example, and Hal Puthoff, these are two men that were like, one was working for the CIA, early on in his career. And these are, physicists and high scientific scientists, but they worked for intelligence agencies, and now they're in the private sector. So that also happens. You have scientists that get brought in under military and intelligence agencies because when they're brought into projects and they come up, when they're younger, if they're learning about classifications and secrecy and compartmentalization and knowing that if they're working on a project, they have to be very quiet about it. And then they leave that world and they go into the private, that way of life that they started with doesn't leave them. So then you get them going and working for corporations like Rand Corporation or Bechtel or, the National Geospatial Institute, which many researchers recently have said is a scientific wing of the NSA. And a lot of people have been looking into the national, if you Google it, it just looks like a normal sort of geeky scientific institution, but they are deeply embedded in, they're basically like the right hand of the NSA in space. And they've been, apparently Danny Sheehan, I interviewed him. You can look this hour and a half